Yes, sir. So with the permission of the chair, Professor Manoj Dixit, sir, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed participants, on the behalf of the IPAN Foundation and the organizing committee, it is my honor and privilege to welcome all of you to the 2023 International Conference on the Current Policy and Administrative Research Trends. This 5-day conference promises to be a remarkable platform for scholars, researchers, practitioners, and policymakers to share insights, exchange ideas, and foster collaborations in the field of public administration and public policy. Allow me to introduce the esteemed individuals who will be leading this conference. We are honored to have Professor Manoj Dixit, the professor and head of the Department of Public Administration at the University of Lucknow, India, and former Vice Chancellor of Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia University, Ayodhya, India, as chair of the conference. Professor Indrajit Singh Sodhi, the professor and head of the Department of Public Administration at Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development, Sri Perambur, India, will be serving as our co-chair. We are privileged to have an array of distinguished keynote speakers who will be sharing their expertise and insights with us. Joining us all the way from Vienna, we have Professor Sukumar Ganpati, a renowned professor from the Department of Public Policy and Administration at the Stephen J. Green School of International Public Affairs, Florida International University, Miami, Florida, USA. We also have Dr. Crystal H. Brown, Assistant Professor of Political Science from the Worcester Polytechnic Institute of Worcester, Massachusetts, USA, and Dr. Stephen McCulley, Associate Professor of Teaching and Co-Director of Global Lab at the same institution. We are honored to welcome several other esteemed individuals as keynote speakers, including Dr. Professor M. Uma Maheshwari, Professor and Head of the Department of Politics and Public Administration at the University of Madras, Chennai, India. Professor Rajvans Gill, Professor and Head of the Department of Public Administration at Punjabi University, Patiala, Punjab, India. Professor Prakash Chand, Professor and Chairperson of the Center for the Study of Law and Governance at the Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, India, and Professor Sabu Thomas, Professor in Political Science at the University of Calicut, Kerala, India. We are truly privileged to have such distinguished speakers grace this conference with their knowledge and expertise. Of course, the heart of this conference lies in its participants. I extend a warm welcome to all the registered participants of the conference. Your presence and contributions will undoubtedly enrich the discussion and create a vibrant atmosphere throughout the conference. We also extend a special welcome to our special invitees from academia and partner organizations. Your presence here reflects the significance of this conference and your commitment to advancing policy and administrative research trends. I would also like to extend a warm welcome to our special invitee who have joined us today. We are honored to Professor B.S. Gumman, former Vice Chancellor of Punjabi University, Patiala, who have joined us from North America. Dr. Naita Bajbarua, Professor at the School of Social Work, Minnesota State University, Moorhead, Minnesota, USA. Dr. Sergei Kalud, Rector of Alfred Nobel University, Dnipro, Ukraine. Dr. Moises Ronald, Dr. Freddy Manuel Camacho, Professor Juan Antonio Gary Montes from the Peru. Lastly, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to all the participants who have dedicated their time and efforts to make this conference possible. Now let us explore why awareness of current policy and administrative research trend is significant for scholars and researchers. Firstly, staying up to date with the latest trend is crucial because policy and administrative landscapes are dynamic, continuously evolving in response to societal, economic, and political changes. By being aware of the current trends, scholars and researchers can ensure that their work remains relevant and impactful, avoiding redundancy. Secondly, awareness of current trends allows scholars and researchers to identify research gaps. Thirdly, being aware of current trends enhances methodologies. Researchers can refine their approaches and adopt innovative methods by staying up to date. Incorporating cutting-edge techniques such as data analytics, qualitative analytics, and mixed method approach enables them to generate robust evidence and obtain deeper insight into complex policy and administrative challenges. Fourthly, awareness of current trends promotes interdisciplinary collaborations. Fifthly, a strong awareness of current policy and administrative research trends empowers scholars and researchers to influence policy and practice. Lastly, current policy and administrative research trends contribute to evidence-based decision-making. In conclusion, awareness of current policy and administrative research trend is crucial for scholars and researchers. It allows them to stay updated, identify research gaps, enhance methodologies, promote interdisciplinary collaborations, influence policy and practices, and contribute to evidence-based decision-making. By staying up to date with the latest trends, researchers can make meaningful contributions to the field of public administration and public policy. Once again, I extend a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you for joining us. I wish you a productive and memorable experience at the 2023 International Conference on Current Policy and Administrative Research Trends. Thank you. Now, it is my great honor to invite Professor Manoj Dixit, the chairman of the IPAN Foundation, to inaugurate the plenary session and the 2023 International Conference on Current Policy and Administrative Research Trends with his address. Professor Manoj Dixit is a highly respected figure in the field of public administration, renowned for his contributions as a professor and head of the Department of Public Administration at the University of Lucknow, India, and as a former vice chancellor of Dr. Ram Manohar Lohia, Awadh University, Ayodhya, India. His expertise, leadership, and commitment to the advancement of policy and administrative research makes him the perfect person to inaugurate this conference. I kindly request Professor Manoj Dixit sir to take the stage and deliver his address, inspiring us all with his insights and visions for the future of policy and administrative research. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Saurabh.
Thank you, sir.
It is indeed a great opportunity for all of us in IPAN Foundation to have organized this international conference on the current policy and administrative research trends. And this conference is second in the series of conferences that we organized on the international platform. The idea behind this kind of and the nature of this conference is to pull together, combine our own thought processes on involvement of academia in policy making process, and also giving the research inputs, as Saurabh mentions, both tools and methods. And this particular conference at this particular juncture becomes very important, because whenever on the global scene there are catastrophes, major events, mega events that affects public administration. Sometimes it's ability to do something, and sometimes it's inability to do nothing. And both require serious researches, and both require serious policy interventions at the time. I remember when I was a student, we were taught about Martin Luther King's movement in America. And that movement, or for that matter, later on, you can think in terms of almost simultaneously, we are thinking in terms of new public administration movement and what we used to call it the turbulent 60s in America. That shaped the world policies to a large extent. Similar thing happened when another big jolt came as a space superiority game between USSR and USA. And as the first rocket launch came from USSR, it became a serious policy debate issue in USA. Then current reason why it is very important for us to have looked into this policies issues is because of the pandemic that struck the world. The academia must realize that it is a godsend opportunity for them to understand, re-understand, reinterpret their own discipline adds both its ability or inability to do something when it is this epidemic struck the world. I remember when such things happened, but the turbulent 60s gave us an opportunity to, the new public administration movement to emerge. And the basic question was the inability of administration to address the issue. And then they came out with, anti-positivist kind of approach or proactive approach, or they gave a lot of solutions at that time. Many of them could not understand the conceptual clarity of, or later on development of concept and ideas into models into public administration discipline, but it definitely gave a movement as to how public administration must be looked into in future. Similar opportunities came due to many other situations. Nagasaki and Hiroshima also gave you opportunity to this. Current issue is twofold for me. I'm not forcing my opinion on anybody. There are two folds. Current age is that of Asia. And Asia must be looked with potential to understand the real policy issues. Asia houses 3/4 of the humanity on globe. And the current issue is, if you look at the policies of the current era, contemporary policies, you will realize that whereas the global problems, the European problems, I'm not saying global, the European problems become global problems and Asian problems remain local problems. That is a huge policy imbalance. Afghanistan is not a local issue. It is a hotbed of extremism and narcotics. And the entire world is getting affected, positively or negatively. Business point of view, positive, of course, and otherwise negative. You cannot say the issues in Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and now, of course, areas adjoining Ukraine are no more the issues which are of local concerns. If we continue to say that they are local issues, we would be doing a great disservice to study of public administration by avoiding the issues of 3/4 of the humanity and concentrating on so-called developed world with only 1/4 of the humanity. It is not the consumerism which will rule the world. It is the numbers of the population and the problems which are of global nature, which have been forcefully converted into local policy issues, are not going to solve the problems of the world in future. We will not be able to continue with this for long. So this gives us an opportunity to address this issue here. This is the build-up platform. As I remember when in the Toronto conference, Stephen and Crowley, they developed their issues on people with disabilities. It was a huge issue. But the people with disabilities are not restricted to our country. The facilities given to the people with disabilities from one country to other country differ. One culture to other culture also differ. Some cultures believe that the people with disabilities are being cursed by the God, so nothing to be done. Whereas developed nations like Stephen discussed about USA, I happened to be in USA that time, immediately before the conference. They addressed the issue as a human issue. So all these perspectives should be, and I would request and recommend that since a very good galaxy of public administration scholars is collected here in this particular conference, we should start sharing the information, and shared research will help us understand the problem in totality, in its wholesomeness, and also probably lead to good research activities from one country to another. I've always been saying, when you address the issue, today France is suffering, tomorrow some other country will also be there. Because the cultural issues cannot be overcome as a law and order issues. When culture strikes, law and order becomes secondary. So we have to understand the culture in the entire process of entire gamut of policy, public policy as such, and reinterpret the role of these societies, cultures, issues into the academic knowledge of public administration. You cannot remain a science saying that science doesn't include all this. No. Public administration is a social science which includes social before it becomes science. So the social issues need to be imbibed, and the urge or the zeal to remain aloof from this from the social issues in order to become science is meaningless. It has lost its meaning long back now. Each country has to interpret. That much of leverage has to be given to a country to give weightage to the social side of the policies before implementing those policies. And that is something which this platform can start right away, right now. I hope by the end of this conference, we will be able to form certain primary working groups on certain issues, which we will take up further and develop our understanding and share understanding later on the next conference or next year or two, and then able to enrich the entire discipline of public administration with the knowledge of the world, knowledge of the world societies, knowledge of the world culture, imbibed into the process of understanding public policy as such. This is what the message today for me is there. I am very thankful to Saurabh, and also along with the IPAN Foundation, to the Department of Public Administration, Lucknow University, the Center for Study of Law and Governance, JNU, Delhi, Department of Political Science, University of Calicut, Kerala, and Department of Public Administration, Punjabi University, Patiala, and also the Secretary General IPSA, that is International Political Science Association, Canada, RC10. All these have joined hands to organize this particular conference. There will be a 5-day of brainstorming, literally, with number of ideas, number of plenary lectures, and each lectures need to be understood, broken into pieces to make it policy specific. And I would urge all participants present here to develop new research ideas and help us create that repository of new research methodologies, tools, and ideas to make the research more meaningful to the societies that we address rather than the society we don't address. Thank you very much, Saurabh, and all other participants participating in this conference. Well begun is half done. I hope with this galaxy of individuals, intellectuals participating in this conference, it is very well begun. Hope for the best. God bless you all. And let us work on this line. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the insightful message and giving direction to the conference. We owe our gratefulness to you. And I believe that our conference will be moving in the same direction as directed by Honorable Sir. Now, I would like to invite the co-chairperson of the plenary session, Professor Indrajit Singh Sodhi, sir, to address us and share his valuable insights on the current policy and administrative research trends. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Very good day. Welcome all the delegates and experts from the public administration, policy, and allied areas, those who are working their respective areas. So I'm very much happy. Since a long time, my colleague, junior brother, Dr. Saurabh was planning to organize a number of series of conferences. So first, that is on international conference on the current policy and administrative research trends. I'm very much happy that today, in the first day, we are organizing, and all the galaxy of experts are here. So I believe these 5 days will go as per our agenda, as per our objective. This conference regarding current policy and administrative research trends, no doubt, if we see from 1887, when the public administration and academic discipline, Woodrow Wilson. From that period till now, more than 100 years, that means around, we could say, 140 years. So till now, we believe we have observed so many changes have taken place. There was a time when it was believed that there is an identity crisis in public administration. But we all have come across from that period onwards. Nowadays, public administration is everywhere. And particularly when we talk about policy, public policy, it is a multi-dimensional aspect. Because whenever you talk about policy, it includes health policy, environment policy, climate change policy, education policy, children policy, ICT policy, there is no end. But if we try to find out the trends in administration or public administration research, so I believe there have been some interdisciplinary as well as some specific. Like particularly a number of that special issue has come on energy, climate change. Earlier, International Institute of Administrative Science, Brussels, have brought out a series of special publication on climate. Similarly, since 3 years, we have observed 2020, after the corona pandemic, all journal of public administration, whether International Journal of Public Administration or PAR Public Administration Review, or even Indian Journal of Public Administration, whether it is being published by SAYS, Oxford or Routledge, they have brought out special issues on corona. From that period onwards, most of the journal are also focusing on, we find out on health policy, health issue, or what is the role of public administration or administrative institution for the health. So health has become a very important issue. Earlier, if we talk about 20, 30 years before, then most of the public administration journal, they were looking or focusing on only on organization, function, role, and trends like that. But nowadays, totally changed. Even some of the issues has been brought on. We could talk about disaster, risk or hazard or crisis. Even crisis in administration, that means how public administration is trying to look into or tackle the disaster related issue, because disaster we have found out, particularly in Asian country, a number of times it has affected whether it is China, Nepal, as well as India. So disaster is also very important issue, and particularly now there is a rainy season. So India, there have been so many landslides. Some of the roads have been blocked either for 10 hours, 20 hours, even for 1 day, 2 days, 10 days. Like yesterday, we were planning to go to Shimla, but we came to know near Chandigarh, Shimla, Solan is around midway that has been blocked. So around that was Shimla highway was closed for some time. And earlier we have observed that Delhi Manali road was closed more than 20 hours because in Mandi there was so much landslide. So such type of that means issues definitely attracts the attention of the policymakers, planners, as well as those who are experts. So I believe still there is need to look into that. Similarly, when we talk about education, education has also become an important issue. Recently, India have launched new education policy. For that also a number of special issue, almost all journal have looked into from different perspective, how it may affect the, that means we could say future of the education system in India, as well as how it could affect the career. No doubt when we talk about new education policy, it has opened a new Pandora. It has opened nowadays most of the foreign university, they can set up their we could say campus in India. Similarly, nowadays, if we talk about education system India, it is very much such. A number of countries since a long time have demanded why Indian Institute of Public Admission, Indian Institute of Technology, IIT, could not be set up in their country. So recently, IIT Madras, it's another branch out of India. First branch is going to set up in Tanzania. So that is a very good news for all of us. I have worked 2 years in Tanzania, so I know how much they regards the education, how much they give regards to Indian people. So I'm very much happy a new era is going to be initiated. So I believe it is in the future also IIM, Indian Institute of Management, similarly Indian Institute of Public Administration, they can set up their branches or full-fledged institute in other country in the soon, not only Asian but African, but also in European countries. So that is a very good sign Why? Because we all live in this globalization era, which believes in interdisciplinarity. So that has given a very good recognition, and we have observed the recent trend ki almost all the developing countries, they are working together and they have made their place in this 21st century. We have observed a number of publications, particularly like coming on. Recently, one publication was by Isaac Mangalore Professor D. Rajshekhar, handbook on, we could say, development and decentralization in global south. Similarly, earlier one, urban trends in global south. So most of the country also, both books have been published by Routledge. So we have observed that nowadays, even the developed country, they are giving much attention on developing countries because there is a opportunity, there are chances that those who are working in academic area, they can play better role. So I believe we all those who are in the discipline of public administration as well as those who are working on policy, public policy, policy analysis, policy evaluation, they definitely can play a role wherever they are working from their respective country. And we all have to work definitely in tandem, in collaboration. And another trend has been on urbanization. Earlier in India, there was so much emphasis upon, we could say, on panchayati Raj institution, rural local government. But recently we have observed since last 3 to 5 years, government of India also have given attention on urban. Nowadays, so many, every day we find key conferences are being organized. In every international, whichever is directly, indirectly related with urban, government of India is sending its delegation. And particularly in India, if we talk about, there has been one National Institute of Urban Affairs that is under the Ministry of Urban Affairs and Housing, Government of India, that is located in Delhi. That is working very remarkable work. So I believe some attention is also needed on urban area. No doubt, still in India, the population urban is only around 31%, compared to other country in the world where it's 45%, 50%, even more than 50%. But near in the future, around 30 years, around there will be 50% people population of India that will be living in urban. So I believe also there is no need to look into more on urban cities, mega cities, all these cities, sustainable cities, smart city. Even the government of India has launched a project, smart city project, so which all looks into how we can make the life of the people better in the cities. So no doubt there is need to look into all the issues in a systematic way. Most of the government in developing countries, they have shifted from facilitator to regulator. So that's why a number of journals also looking into regulatory agencies, regulatory bodies. 3 years before also, Indian Journal of Public Administration have brought out a special issue on regulatory agencies in India. So regulatory is also one of the important trends if we find out in administrative research. So I believe all those areas, whether it is the climate, energy, health, urban areas, or disaster, or risk, or hazard, or as well as education, these all needs to give more attention. And definitely most of the journal are looking into that aspect. And I believe IPAN, in the collaboration with other agency, international, national, we will definitely try to look into all the issue so that we can bring out some good publication. And I will urge all my team members in the future we can organize on this all these respective areas one separate conferences, because these all issues require a full attention. Not we can look into minutely or minuscule, rather full place we can organize 2 days, 3 days, or 5 days conference on all these issues. So I congratulate my team member, Professor Manoj Dixit. He is our mentor, our pattern, under whose guidance we are always working how we can make our organization more important, observable. So this is the first good attempt that has been initiated by my brother, Dr. Saurabh. I am very much happy Professor Prakash is also here today. He will also like to speak. He has a specialization on environment. He has done remarkable work. So I believe he will look into all these issues. And today we could not find Professor Prabhadatta. He is our also core team member. Under his guidance we are working. So my good wishes to all, and I am happy this have taken place. Thank you, dear brother. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Your insightful observations on various trends would be giving direction to the conference, and you will be delighted to know that the next session, that is the presentation session 1, has incorporated some of the papers that are based on the public health policy. So
Good,
three or
great.
four papers you are chairing that session. So it will be great privilege to all the speakers who will be speaking on this topic. And it is my privilege to work under the mentorship of all of you. I am so blessed. Thank you so much, sir. So Professor Sukumar Ganpati is now traveling in taxi. He is in Vienna, Greece, on a special invitation. So he will be joining us shortly. So I would like to request Dr. Crystal S. Brown, Dr. Crystal H. Brown, Assistant Professor of the Political Science, Social Science and Policy Studies Department, Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Worcester, Massachusetts, USA, to deliver her keynote speech and give a direction to the conference. The floor is all yours, Dr. Crystal.
Thank you so much, Sarup, for inviting me to participate in this conference. It's really exciting to be able to be in the US and in Massachusetts and interact with folks all over the world and in India. I have some slides that I would like to share, if it's possible. Oh, okay. Yep, it's there. Let me find my slides on the screen. Here we are. And thank you so much, everybody, for allowing me to be here again. And can you guys see my slides, or do you see notes as well? Just the slides now? And I will talk a little bit more about some of the work that I've been doing with Dr. Steve McCulley, who will present after me, but I'll be very brief. I think I have 10 to 15 minutes to speak. But this research that I've been working on deals with including vulnerable populations in responses, government responses, and terms of crises, but we look at climate change specifically. And I'm a researcher, a political scientist, and I'm always interested in inclusivity, how diverse groups of people are included with various types of things, whether it's in education, whether it's in when people move from one country to another, how are they included in society? When women join institutions, how their inclusivity process looks, and so on and so forth. So talking about vulnerable populations, for me, that is a very wide category of people. And in this particular project, and looking at crisis management and governance, I wanted to look at how vulnerable populations, particularly people with disabilities, are included in climate disaster mapping and responses. So I want to start by kind of framing what this looks like for me in terms of governing institutions at all levels. We all know they organize efforts to minimize any type of disaster. They have, we know that crisis can impact inequality. It can emphasize, with an emphasis on the need to protect various vulnerable populations, whether it's the elderly, impoverished people, disenfranchised minorities, women, immigrants, and also, of course, people with disabilities. And when we look at crisis and governance, we are trying to, hopefully the government is trying to increase strategies to embrace planning and policies that will help these vulnerable groups of people, and also promote diversity and inclusivity within institutions that are responsible for making sure that people's basic human rights are respected and honored. And so with this project, one of the groups that we noticed, so the vulnerable population, were people with disabilities. And we noticed that and when we think about climate disaster responses, when we think about even responses with the pandemic, a lot of people with disabilities, PWDs, are overlooked in research and in specifically with planning. So when we think about the impacts that crisis might have on people with disabilities in this particularly vulnerable group, We know that unlike any other category of vulnerability, disabilities can affect individuals at any point in their lives. Some of us are born, with a specific gender. Some of us are born with a ethnicity or race. But a disability can impact all people, irrespective of what their identity might be. When we think about how widely spread, we know that 15% of the world's population, about 1 billion people, have a disability. It's an international group of people. It's irrespective of country, religion, place, where somebody was born, etc. We know that also people with disabilities, they face higher death rates when climate change is happening, when climate crises and emergencies emerge. And it's a spectrum of people. It's a very diverse group in terms of their functional limits, in terms of their restriction to a wheelchair, or having a chronic medical issues or conditions, mental health, anyone who might be impacted by blindness, deafness, and autism. It's a very diverse group of people. And we know, again, that disabilities are not exclusive to anyone at any age, and sometimes disabilities can occur overnight for folks. So when we think about this particular group of people, we are positioning that they need to be more included, especially in crisis planning, and particularly when it impacts climate change and climate disasters. So in order to have equitable policies in place and effective policies in place to protect this vulnerable group, we need to start including them in our planning and in our responses. And also it's a part of our basic human rights framework internationally and domestically for this vulnerable population. So we took a look at specifically Massachusetts, and we were using Massachusetts in the United States as a case study. We're at the East Coast. A lot of us are experiencing, shorelines that are coming closer and closer to our cities, floods, storms, etc. And so we look at this municipal vulnerability preparedness program, and we examined how effective it was in reaching vulnerable populations and specifically people with disabilities. And we looked at the MVP because it focuses on vulnerable populations, and a lot of the towns and cities in Massachusetts do participate in the MVP program, with 270 out of 390 counties participating in this program. It's essentially the MVP is a planning and preparedness program in response to a climate crisis. So we found that, and I'm going to sum this up. We found that actually although the MVP program focuses on vulnerable groups, there's very little focus specifically on people with disabilities. They focus on social economic status, income. They'll focus a lot on race and ethnicity. They will focus on language ability and English, how to reach out to folks who might not speak English, but there's very little effective planning for people with disabilities. And we argue that it's very important to reach this demographic. Some of the methods we used, we interviewed folks from the MVP program, officials. We also interviewed people with disabilities who are experts in this field, who might have a disability themselves, but they advocate for their rights in Massachusetts, but also globally. And we also reviewed publicly available documents from the MVP program, and we worked with a student who participated in some of the talks with people with disabilities to how to better include them in climate resilience planning. 3 takeaways. We have to examine the functional limits across disability types when we think about crises, and we have to think about what that individual person can or cannot do versus what their diagnosis says they cannot do, or what versus their diagnosis. For instance, if somebody has a limitation with their ability to walk, does that mean they cannot walk at all? or do they use some type of assistance to walk? And planning for that individual would be needs to be taken care of in terms of how they respond in times of crisis, and how the government or entities will respond. There's also needs to work on removing barriers to accessing publicly available emergency resources, such as evacuation alerts. Often at times, this could be, thinking about how we communicate an emergency. Is it through, when we think about the pandemic, COVID-19, how are they communicating issues to folks who might have cognitive disability? How will that information impact someone who might be schizophrenic or bipolar? And how are they going to react to the notifications and communications they receive? Also, people who might be, have a vision impairment or might be blind or deaf, thinking about the resources used to communicate effectively with these vulnerable populations, with people with disabilities. And then we have to think about the limitations that varied across crisis, and plan for people with disabilities with their own input, including them in the process and including them in planning for crisis responses. So I wanted to bring this broadly, since we are an international office or conference, and think about how we as folks focused on public policy and public administration can do our research, and how we can expand, including people with disabilities in our work. So we think about international institutions. Obviously, we think about how organizations like the United Nations, our own governments, can shape policies and provide and promote more inclusivity approaches that will impact people with disabilities. We can think about human rights, framing it as a human rights issue. Oftentimes, people with disabilities are impacted with their employment, their housing, their water, their sanitation, and also their freedom of movement. How can we research the impacts of certain disasters or crises and put those needs at the forefront with our policy recommendations? And we also think, I also argue that we need to talk about this and how it adds to other international commitments, such as the Sandy framework and the Incheon strategy, and how we can expand these frameworks. We expand these strategies to be even more inclusive of people with disabilities, especially considering that this is 15% of the world's population. Also think about how this impacts sustainability development goals, right? If we're thinking about sustainable cities and communities, how can we address the needs of people with disabilities in urban resilience planning? How can we incorporate them into these conversations? Climate action, what do we do? How do we respond to people with disabilities? How can we include them in these various goals? And then partnering across countries, across societies and groups of people to collaborate and partner with government organizations and various stakeholders, so that we're more inclusive of this vulnerable population. And so that's it from me. I'll stop sharing. Thank you so much for listening to me present more about how we can be more inclusive for this vulnerable population.
Thank you so much, Crystal, for the insightful message and giving direction to the conference. Indeed, the participants will be more focused on the issues that you dealt with in your presentation. Now, I would like to welcome Dr. Stephen M. Macaulay, Associate Professor of Teaching. Oh, I'm sorry for the inconvenience. Now, I would like to request Professor Sukumar Ganpati, Professor, Department of Public Policy Administration, Stephen J. Green School of International and Public Affairs, Florida International University, Miami, Florida, USA, to deliver his keynote speech and give direction to the conference. Sir, the floor is all yours.
It's done.
Hello. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, sir.
How are you all? Glad I
doing-
could make this session.
Thank you so
Can
much.
you
You
hear
made it.
Yes. I'm on the road, so please forgive my appearance and all of the background noise that you might hear.
You are looking very handsome, sir.
I appreciate that. If you don't mind, I could start with sharing the PowerPoint that we have. I will share my screen.
Yes, please.
There. So you should be able to see my screen, right?
Right. Yes.
Okay, once again, thank you very much for the invitation, and I appreciate this. My main focus in this particular conversation is going to be on the emerging opportunities and challenges that we have in terms of public administration and public policy, both in terms of practice as well as scholarship. I've been thinking about this for some time. So let me just give a little background of myself first, and then go into what the context is in which we are thinking about this kind of idea, and what kind of challenges we have for governance, as well as what the new opportunities are. And since I'm focusing mostly on the digital side, I'll be looking at this from a governance, from a digital side, and then can conclude and have some questions if you have. So just to talk a little bit about me, I'm, as Saurabh mentioned, at Florida International University. It's located in Miami, but I'm presently in Vienna, overlooking the beautiful Danube. I have a bachelor's and a master's in architecture, going to urban planning. But mostly what I focus on for the last 10 years is on the digital world. And in this context, I've had several kinds of research projects which are going on with the National Science Foundation, with Cyber Florida, which is part of Florida, and also with the IBM Center for the Business of Government. So given that background, it's not surprising that when I'm looking at governance, I'm looking at it from a perspective of the digital side, right? The electronic side. So what do I mean by that digital side? In the large context, as it has been repeatedly said, we are in the fourth IR, the Industrial Revolution. It is a highly digitized world. Internet, as we are in this particular conversation itself, is the main connector between all of us, no matter where we are. And these changes which are happening are very, very high velocity. What was 10 years ago is not what 10 years now, and what will be 10 years from now is not going to be what it is now, right? And most of these changes are also very, very transformational, meaning the fundamental processes by which some of these are happening are themselves transforming. And in that context, we could argue at some level that the governance itself is transforming. And you could see the communication costs are falling down so much. Even the data storage costs have fallen down so much. So with that kind of smoothening of what we call the communications infrastructure, the data infrastructure, this is all changing so very quickly, and it's enabling a number of things, but at the same time is a challenge for a lot of things. And if some of us who have white hair might remember Alvin Toffler's future shock, right? He was talking about this in 1970. The future shock is already a past. It's not a future anymore in that sense. We are constantly amazed by what we are looking at. This graphic shows how very fast those transformations have been happening. If you think of the landline telephone, it took almost 89 years to reach only half of the United States. but it took only 25 years for cell phones to reach half of the world. Imagine that big kind of a transformational change in which it's happening, right? And that's the context which I'm talking about. And this is not just the kind of hype that we are caught up in as it's with the AI, with artificial intelligence. A lot of us are concerned about, rightly, about what it's going to bring and what kinds of changes are that's going to happen. Many of those concerns are rightfully there, but some of it is also hype. But this is not concentrating on AI per se, but the whole ecosystem of how the technology systems are changing in that context. And this is, we are talking about the drones, the audio and the video visuals in terms of how we are looking at things, how the ID systems are changing. The Indians ourselves are aware of the Aadhaar card, right? That itself is bringing in big changes. The big data, the IoT systems, sensors, blockchain, you name it. These are kind of big changes which are happening. And most of these changes have been happening in the last 20 years. Blockchain itself is only about since 2009. So many of these changes which are also happening are mutually reinforcing, meaning that we are getting into this boat which one pushes the other. And we have a sense of both competition as well as cooperation in this. And last but not the least, the things are changing so fast with all of what we are looking at, that there's a convergence between what is real and what is virtual, to the extent that we're really not able to make the difference between what is the real and the virtual, right? So given that, what kind of challenges do we have? Huge challenges. Keeping up with all of these, as I have been saying, this is breathtaking. We are continuously chasing, like a dog chasing its own tail, right? Some of us could be left behind in that, meaning countries could be left behind in that, societies could be left behind in that, but at the same time, there'll be countries which are ahead in that. There's a human resource challenge for all of governance side in terms of training people who are working presently, as well as the new workforce which comes in. Teenagers are much of what technology is than what 50 plus year olds are, right? There's a lot of misinformation as well as disinformation which goes on, and that also we have to be completely aware of. A lot of the changes which are happening are also happening in a way that these are displacing the traditional trust systems in traditional authority, and it's also enabling new kinds of work and new kinds of organizational forms, like that of the gig work, the sharing economy. I've been writing about that as well. And we have to keep up with the new laws in that front. At the same time, I would say that there are also opportunities for what we are looking at, right? We have new capacities. If we think of governance, we should be focusing mainly on the human side of it, that is the problem-solving side of it. For agencies, public agencies especially, it is a mission-based approach. It's not about technology adoption for technology's sake, but more of how technology can help in adding to the mission. So it's not about the dog chasing its own tail, but in terms of what helps in solving the problems. So there are two big parts which I've been working on for the past few years. That's on the design thinking side, that is on what we should be doing. How do we employ technology to solve the problems? How we can streamline and simplify complex problems. And most of human problems are much more interesting because they are so complex, right? And in technology world, here where there's a whole approach to how they work with agile methods, and we could apply some of those methods. We could learn some of those methods from that and apply to governance side also. That's all about how to do things. That's thinking about how we can respond to public needs. There are changes in those so very quickly. We have to not necessarily keep up with technology, but respond to what their needs are. Be nimble and flexible. Think about how we can solve one problem at a time, and then get to the larger goal. And we have to be proactive in all of this. The agile movement itself, it has been showing up in a number of different ways here in the United States. The National Academy of Public Administration, as well as the IBM Center for the Business of Government, have combined to set up the Agile Government Center. If you're not aware of it, you can look up that, and they have a number of case studies which they have been doing that. I have myself studied that. The advantage is that it does assume that all of the situations we are in are quite fluid and they are changeable over time. And that's helpful in terms of looking at how quickly technology is changing. And it's a continuous kind of a process. It's a continuous learning process in that. The challenge, of course, is that we need new forms of various things, including how we contract out, how we procure things, how we think of leadership. Leadership itself has to be open to those kinds of forms. We have seen a lot of organizations which are stuck because of leadership reasons, and requires a lot more of a broader ecological support on that. But having said that, there are also positive, good cases of how these digital government examples are working around, such as the innovation offices, which have come up in a number of different local governments. In fact, local governments are taking the lead on how innovative governance could be. Thinking about design thinking, there are also service design studios like that of New York City as well as Austin, which had design thinking centers focused on problem-solving processes. And also new kinds of services like that of citizen-oriented services like the 311. 311 is equivalent of 911, which is a non-emergency phone call system for any kind of problems that are not related to life and death questions. There are various kinds of digital services which are also emerging beyond that of what we know as the public side. So governance in that sense is not just the public agency or the public sector, but also the nonprofit as well as the for-profit. So agencies like Civic Plus, Code for America, Granicus, these are nonprofit agencies which have been working with various local government agencies on how to help in connecting with the public. And last but not the least, there are also open administrative data platforms which are emerging. There's a lot more of an openness or a lot more of willingness from local governments to share their data rather than keep the data to themselves. In a data world where data is king, public agencies could be sharing more of those. I know I've been kind of quickly breezing through, just keep with the time that Sharabi had given, but to just kind of conclude what I'm getting into is saying is that, yes, it's a digital world, but it's also human. It's the humans who decide, not the digital side. So we have to be leading the technology, not led by the technology. We have to look at this from a positive development perspective, not the destruction perspective. And that's another whole different conversation. Third, which I've been emphasizing here also, is that technology is for solving human problems, human governance problems. It's not for technology's sake again. And last but not the least, being agile about what we are doing. And the last graphic captures a lot of that sensibility. So with that, let me thank you again for putting me on, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm afraid I would have to leave after this because, as you might imagine, I'm on travel.
Thank you so much.
very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Sukumar, for giving us time. You are traveling and you are in Vienna. You have joined for Vienna. That is we are very grateful to you. So anyone has any question, then they can ask to Professor Sukumar.
Let me ask a question to Professor Ganapati.
Yes, sir.
So we wanted, it is quite accepted that the administrative structures in in any kind of a democratic society has to be an agile one. But with the changes in the time, we find that the structures are rather collapsing rather than exhibiting the kind of agility which is supposed to be inbuilt into them. How do you look at this problem, and as you have been emphasizing on agility, how do you think that the administrative structures, not only in the advanced countries but also in the developing countries, can be made more agile so as to be responsive to the people's grievances? Thank you.
That's an excellent question, and that's part of what we've been working on. One of the main kind of challenges in that is the leadership. The leadership, it comes, it has to be enabled at the top level. At the same time, there has to be capacity at the bottom side. So even if we have capacity at the bottom side, we have noticed that if the leadership is not accepting that kind of an agile approach, they don't, right? So to answer your question, the first particular issue is that of leadership. That has to change, right? And that comes with change in blood, the younger generation taking a lead more, and they're far more open to technology than we old foggies are, in a way. I put myself in that. And beyond that, the second part is there is also a pressure from outside. That is, the civic technology groups, they themselves are coming up with new ideas on how to use data, how to use public information in ways that we can enhance the public services. So that's coming from outside, and to the extent that there is this chemistry between the nonprofit organizations, the civic service organizations, and the public sector, you have either a beautiful dance or not, right? It's not going to work in a few places, and it's going to work in a few places, and to the extent it works, it gives itself the dividends.
Thank you very much.
Professor Kumar, I would like to add something to this, that by observation, that the top-bottom approach is also responsible for this in the democratic developing countries. Whatever, it should be two-side communication. The governance should be two-side communication. Otherwise, the things will not change in the developing countries, which is rarely seen anywhere in the Asian countries, particularly.
Well, there are prospects I see. I haven't been working on Indian governance, but I'm starting to recently. I've been told there are quite a good number of stories which are coming out, which are very powerful. So it will be interesting to see how, it's a tug of war. It's a push and pull. So yes, I completely agree with you. It is a conversation. It's going to work in places. It's not going to work in a few places.
Thank you so much. Any more questions from Professor Ganapati? Okay, I believe that there are no more questions. Thank you so much, sir, for giving us time. Have a wonderful stay at Vienna, and we are very much grateful to you, and we wish a grand success to you at Vienna. The purpose for which you are there, and
appreciate
we would like to be in touch with you, and it will be honored to work with you in the future if you agree, if you want, if you allow.
Yes, absolutely. I've been looking to expand. India is one of the very fascinating places in terms of looking at this.
Thank you so much, sir. So with the permission of the chair, I would like to invite our next keynote speaker, Dr. Stephen Macaulay, Associate Professor of Teaching, Co-Director, Global Lab, Co-Director, Melbourne Project Center, Worcester Polytechnical Institute, Worcester, Massachusetts, USA. Professor Stephen, the floor is all yours. Please.
Thank you.
Sir.
Thank you, sir. And thank you to everybody for welcoming me. Thank you for the committee for inviting me to participate in this. It's such an honor to be here with this international community, to learn from others and to share with others what I've been thinking about in relation to policy administration. I'm going to share a few slides as well to start it off, my talk. Okay. Let's do turn the slideshow. Okay, yeah, thank you. So I'm going to pick up on a theme that Professor Brown was raising a little bit. I'm going to speak broadly, more generally, about this question of centering marginalized populations in policy and administration. And we can think a little bit about what that means, marginalized, and how it might apply to all kinds of work. I'll be sharing some examples from my work around environmental justice and climate planning, but we can think of this, I hope, in regards to broader themes within policy and administration. So I want to raise this question first. Why think about centering marginalized populations? One is that we're just facing unseen conditions, non-analogous conditions in terms of climate change, human health, and the pandemic that we've all recently been through, as well as levels of inequality around the world that we haven't seen before in history. So with these non-analogous conditions, it brings new pressures to the surface, and we know that this further increases the inequities between populations. And I just want to make sure we're not overlooking some real potential that we have in considering marginalized perspectives and voices in planning and policy and administration broadly. Also, the broad social contract for science, which is part of why we all get into research, whether it's research or practice and administration and policy. But there is that sense that we want to apply knowledge for the broad human good. And then the theme that I want to really bring out of my comments here today is that actually, by considering the perspective of marginalized populations, it's not just a question of equity or not just a question of fairness to those marginalized populations, whatever that kind of population might be. It's actually, we can achieve superior outcomes if we consider this kind of perspective. So that's kind of theme that I want to bring out here in this talk. Superior outcomes for everybody, actually, not just those marginalized populations. So that's what I want to explore here. So this slide, I want to rethink the idea of vulnerable populations. And on the picture on the right is a character. I'm going to take a chance here because maybe some of you all don't know the story of Game of Thrones, but some of you may have seen this show. This is a character named Bran Stark, who was paralyzed because of someone tried to make an attempt on his life, and he ended up paralyzed. But he ended up having supernatural powers and ended up have the most powerful person in the kingdom, and was able to save his family because of his unique gifts. So we all have stories like this from our own cultures of the marginalized or the disenfranchised or the injured who actually has special gifts that they can use to help the broader society. So that I want to kind of invoke this metaphor of the marginalized who can actually help us to see in new and important ways. So a couple of themes that I want to raise are, one, the importance of advantage thinking over deficit thinking. So looking for the assets that any community can put forward onto the planning agenda. Also, the theme of recognitional justice. I do a lot of work in the environmental justice area, and one of the important forms of justice is simply recognizing the value of different cultures and communities, histories and life ways and cultures in ways that they see things and the way they talk about things. So that simply inviting different kinds of people to the table isn't really enough. What's important is to actually realize the value in their words and in their life ways and ways that they frame problems. So we need to create space for actually reopening up our discourses to accommodate different ways of framing things, recognizing that those different perspectives. And simply the demonstrated resilience of marginalized populations, those populations, whether in a global scale, thinking about developed versus developing countries, or if we think about it within the scale of a small community and think about populations that have been historically marginalized, or the work that Professor Brown and I have done on people with disabilities and thinking about how they have not been included in climate planning, but realizing that actually these populations are the very ones that have had to demonstrate a great amount of resilience already. So are there kind of, can we learn from the creativity that these populations have already been exhibiting? And then there's a concept of universal design, which comes out of the disability studies and design for disabilities. But I think we can apply more broadly in policy and administration to think about how can we design in ways that accommodate everybody from the beginning. And if we think about the populations that might need the most support or have the most challenges and design for them, it again leads to superior outcomes for broader populations. So that's where I want to kind of center marginalized populations in policy and administration. I'm going to share briefly a couple of examples of work that I've done, mostly in the environmental justice area, that have brought this theme forward for me. One is the question of heat risk. I've been doing a lot of work on extreme heat and heat waves in my city of Worcester, Massachusetts. And we see tremendous disparities in heat within the city. And I'm sure some of you all have seen this in the cities where you live in, wherever that is around the world. Temperatures that can vary by up to 14 degrees Fahrenheit at the same moment, which can have dramatic differences in health outcomes due to heat. So, and you see this map here that we did showing the intense heat in the center of the city versus much cooler conditions on the outskirts. Of course, on the outskirts, that's where it's more forested, there's more vegetation to cool it. And also that's where wealthier populations live. And in the center of the city are communities that have been historically marginalized from decision-making and have less resources and lower quality living conditions and greater risk of heat disasters and heat risks. And there's a lot of other factors that contribute at the individual level, such as age and whether people are living alone and whether they have prior health conditions. So we saw these great disparities in health risks around the community. And so how we've thought about approaching that from the policy perspective is to focus on the most marginalized communities. So here's a picture from the city of a community that has no vegetation around it. The building quality is very poor, so that makes the health risks, the heat risks, even worse inside it. So if we can start with these kinds of neighborhoods and do retrofits on the buildings and add some vegetation around the area and provide some support so that these people aren't priced out of the area when the area does become greener and better quality of life, this leads to better outcomes for the city overall, not just for the people living in this particular house that we see, or not just the people living in this community, but better outcomes for the city overall. It's better, essentially better return on the investment of making interventions in this kind of neighborhood, causes greater improvements for the interventions. The heat island effect is reduced in that area, and that has sort of spillover cooling effects around the community. It leads to better social equity and cohesion in these particular neighborhoods, but then across the city as well. And the general landscape aesthetics in the city are improved. So trying to center in on the populations that have been most marginalized and looking for the kind of spillover and improvements for the city overall. Another example where I've seen this theme come up is in energy transition work that I've worked on in the same city of Worcester, Massachusetts. We had an initiative to stimulate a green tech cluster in the area. This is a strategy for economic development that attracts firms in the green energy sector and tries to create sort of agglomerations of economic activity around the sector and leading to more innovation in that area and leading to a kind of changeover and a sustainability transition toward green energy. And so the research project was to stimulate a green tech cluster that was based on a successful cluster in the biotech area in the same region. There's been a very successful boom in the biotech sector in that area. a lot of agglomeration of economic activities that's just led to positive feedbacks and more growth in that area. And that sector has really boomed. And so we thought, can we stimulate a green tech sector in the same way? And we looked closely into a lot of the factors that went into the success of that biotech cluster. And we thought about how we can model those for the green tech cluster. What we found, though, is that it's actually very difficult to build a green tech cluster in the same way, because energy technologies just operate in a very different way, whereas the cluster strategy is designed for globally competitive firms and them profit seeking, and that's what leads to some of the agglomeration activities. Energy systems are quite different. They're deeply embedded in communities and regional economies and cultures. They're deeply embedded within the houses themselves and the energy practices of the individual householders. So in a different way from biotech, we realized that if we're going to stimulate a green energy cluster in the area, we actually have to start with the householders and their energy practices and their beliefs about what energy is. And so we have to think about a cluster in a much broader way that mobilizes different stakeholders, individuals throughout the different neighborhoods in the city to get involved in the energy transition process. And I'll give one more example, which is the work that Crystal Brown and I have recently done on including people with disabilities in climate change planning. I won't say a lot about it because Crystal talked about it a bit already, but we'll just note that there are disproportionate impacts of climate events on people with disabilities. That's both disaster events and sort of slow onset events like increasing heat and changing air quality that especially affect people with disabilities. And those are the very people who already have struggled to get access to resources for housing and for transportation and healthcare. And as Professor Brown pointed out, we saw systematically lack of inclusion of people with disabilities in climate resilience planning. So just to take this forward into this theme of centering these marginalized populations, one is the importance to emphasize the rights and capabilities of people with disabilities that we all already recognize as basic human rights, but somehow we forget about or leave out when it comes to climate change planning, this new area of planning that we all have to shift our focus on. We've somehow ignored the basic human rights that we have to figure out how to bring that back into this new paradigm of climate resilience planning. And another is the idea of focusing on the social determinants of disaster risk, so that we don't think about the limitations or the physical limits of individuals and the special needs that individuals might have, though that is important, but also to recognize the failures in the pre-disaster society itself to provide the accommodations for people with disabilities, so that the responsibility actually lies in the structures of society itself. In, for example, not discriminating against people with disabilities and creating conditions that they can have a thriving life already. So that's important. And I wanted to bring up this quote as I just wrap up the comments here. This is from one researcher in the area of disability studies, who says that given the knowledge, resources, and communities that persons with disabilities have developed for resilience in the face of natural disasters, as well as the structural barriers that they must confront on a daily basis, their roles as knowers and makers should be especially valued in a future where life will likely be much more challenging due to the impacts of climate change. That knowledge has the potential to not only improve the lives of people with disabilities, but also the lives of society at large. So this is this point I want to bring out, that there is this particular creativity and knowledge base and resilience in people who've had to deal with the effects of marginalization in whatever ways that might be. So just as I wrap up the comments here, I just kind of emphasize again the need to look for policy insights in surprising places and among populations that maybe historically have been marginalized from our conversations. Of course, to continue to diversify research and administration teams to have as many different kinds of voices as possible in those conversations, and to allow our policy premises and discourses to expand to accommodate insights from places we may not have even expected. So I'll finish there, and happy to take any comments or just turn over to other speakers that can share with us today.
Thank you, Dr. Stephen, for the wonderful, insightful note. I believe that the disability inclusive climate change planning will be more gaining more attention from the public administration researchers. I express my gratefulness to you and Dr. Crystal Brown, both of you, for joining the conference. With the permission of the chair, I would like to invite Professor Dr. M. Uma Maheshwari, Madam, Professor and Head, Department of Politics and Public Administration, University of Madras, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India, to take the floor and deliver her keynote speech. Madam, are you here?
Yeah, good evening, good morning.
Good evening, Madam.
Greetings to one and all. And namaste and wishes to all of you who have connected virtually. So I take this opportunity to thank the organizer, especially Dr. Swarab Chandra, who have given me this opportunity to share the space in this international conference. Well, he has given me the task of talking on recent trends in policy and public administration research. I have no slides. I thought I would just talk to you and put my random thoughts on the subject that is so very close and which you have put in some 30 years of experience in both teaching and research. Well, in this 21st century, we are in a world where the resources are scarce and we are in need of dire sustainable development. So definitely research in public administration is what is more important, because my topic that is given is recent trends in public administration and policy research. So we cannot negate the fact that knowledge of public administration is very essential, and the role of the government in making policy and implementing those policies for the people is the important motto of the government. To deliver the needs of the people depends on what kind of policies the governments across the world have been making. Well, the scholars like Woodrow Wilson, Herbert Simon, Robert Dahl, and Dwight Waldo have indeed made a strong impact on the evolution of public administration. All of these scholars have not only propounded theories, but they have set its paradigms. In recent years, we find the scholars across the various journals that they have published have shown rigorous approach to research with theory-based inquiry and application of sophisticated empirical research tools. There is a need for integrating various modules in public administration, wherein today a scholar is able to reframe and expand the role of public administration and connect it with the real-time practice and the research in trying to understand the background of these issues. So today it has become more problem-centered, and this approach is reiterating the need for interdisciplinary or multidisciplinary or cross-disciplinary applications in creating a policy science for democracy. So we do read a lot from the experts and the works like Van de Ven, who has gave emphasis on engaged scholarship, informed basic research, collaboration basic research, design and evaluation research, and action intervention research. All these factors have created an impact and influenced public policy, not only for the present, but in the future too. Well, all of us belonging to the family of public administration and its related disciplines, we do agree that there is a nexus between public administration and policy research. The focus is to understand how government machinery is operated by the executive. And we do know that these operations depend on the skills of the bureaucrats or skills of the executive who run and manage the organization. And to evaluate those policies, you need to have some measures to find out where they are, how they are poised, and how far they're going to impact the society. So the evaluation of policy has gained importance in the recent times. Gauging the effects of a policy, new policy proposals can be formulated, ensuring its effectiveness. And to receive it, to understand it, we need to understand the political and societal realm in which it is made. The nexus between public administration and policy is more about managing versus formulating the goal for government in ensuring better society. Both these dimensions necessitate importance of acquiring leadership and management skill along with research-oriented analytical thinking. To reflect upon the trends in policy and public administration, the primemost effort is to observe the environment around us, the changes, and how we can anticipate, prepare, and address issues in it. To properly diagnose the nature of policy and administration research, a cursory glance of the background of this discipline is what is required. That will give us a fruitful path. We know both of these disciplines are giving importance to the private sector whilst planning for the well-being of the society. To explore further, the nexus of public administration and policy making is also based on the nature of government and its decision making. This discipline is indeed connected with the discipline of political science, economics, accounting, law, management, social work, psychology, and sociology. In spite of its nexus with very many social science subjects, there is still an identity crisis for the subject. So we are trying to see how we are able to make, through the research, how we are making the relevance of the subject today when we are in the world of having more scientific outlook and more technology-based world. So we do understand how the behavior of human being is going to be an important factor in creating good administrators and thereby good policies. So there are divergent views because we know the political outlook of people has influenced the government and thereby it has its impact on policy making and implementation. So today we find the world across the scholars have been making a lot of attempts to do research and one of the important leading subjects in research today. And the public administrators and policy makers have to constantly interact and involve in the continuous process of reevaluation and ascertain the acceptability of the policy options. The public administration, to make a success of a policy, have to necessarily consider the process outside the gamut of political, social, and economic factors. Well, in recent years, there has been a recognition and a lot of research findings have been there to inform policy decisions, to inform about policy decisions and implementation strategies. To go further, we need to understand the dynamics of public administration and public policy. As both these disciplines are parts of government process, the individuals who are involved in it should possess effective communication skills. Strategic thinking on societal issues and official wisdom is required. To enrich the life of the citizen, the public administration should work upon developing these basic skills and contribute to the process of creating effective policies. Further, the proposal to create sound policies are often administered to the public administrators and controversy arises who is really involved in making policies, which seems to be unclear today. Two evident trends in social science has always been a rigorous analysis and regular observation. And today, issues like policy, politics, and governance has become more complex. The concept of dynamics is not new to public administration research. The empirical analysis with complexity theories, concepts in public administration is relatively scarce. Although the ideas of dependency and connectivity are better developed in public administration, the concepts of nonlinear dynamics and dynamic equilibrium as in network, organization, and governance, which is not applied concretely, thereby there is a little issue in understanding the application of these two subjects. So it is clearly evident as the discipline of public administration is evolving into the new century and the subdomain of subject matter has extended from new public administration to new public management to governance to policy economics and so on. So when we talk about the current world, which is influenced by forces of globalization, accelerated information, and flattened social structure, there is a contradiction between public's demand for public services and government supply. The needs of the public are diversified, but the supply provided by the government is relatively simple. There is rising contradiction between the public and the government, and how the government allows the society to participate in public management is a new and continuous concept in this academic research. With increasing demand of citizens, the contradictions and crises in social life and public management are still intensifying. Hence, studies from 3 dimensions of citizen subjectivity, interpersonality, and sociality, and specifically exploring organizational flexibility, planning, and diversity is required. New policy or technical skills are needed as new issues come forward on the political agenda. There should be need for creating new modes and orders, which create high challenges for both theory and practice of public administration. To cater to the future needs of the citizen, we need a leader with required abilities, attitude, and knowledge. So training and professionalism of future leaders will enable an environment to formulate policies efficiently, effectively, economically, and with equity. So there is a compelling need to develop a cadre of future practitioners who are well equipped to meet emerging policy challenges. The researcher's approach to research should be intentionally problem-oriented, contextually grounded, and interdisciplinary enhancing scholars should necessarily have knowledge and have maintained connections. To have process-wise future research on the implications of use of IAI for public governance should move towards more public sector focused, empirical, multidisciplinary, and explanatory research, while focusing more on specific forms of AI rather than AI in general. To have a cursory glance of so various theories that have been used in policy and public administration research. To mention a few, we have used the advocacy coalition framework, which tries to understand the change that of ideas that has a change which is due to ideas to adapt and bring about change in their operations and to suit the shock waves of the political system. So this approach has been applied, but it has its own challenges. Likewise, we do have approaches like policy learning, punctuated equilibrium, theories of institutional change, multi-level governance, policy network theories, and disruptive innovation, and plethora of other interesting theories which inspect on range of issues like change, ranging from path dependence, policy networks, and disruptive innovation to the politics of change and reform. And all of them have their own strengths and weaknesses, and researchers have been trying to see if there is a methodology in which you can maximize the outcome of these research. There is need for additional research. We should consider how theories of change, policy change, and policy implementation could be applied at various levels, depending on the countries, systems, communities, and schools. It would be fruitful to examine the challenges of implementation across policy areas and what lessons can be learned from empirical examples. Overall, while policymakers can plan to pass new policies, the dynamics of policy change are rather complex, and thus successful policy change and implementation often does not take place. That is why it is better to understand the conditions and factors which leads to the need for research. To conclude, research in the field of public administration needs to engage in a research process which would try to emphasize on the methods we apply, interdisciplinary nature of the theories we use, the research questions we ask. Interestingly or increasingly, we are witnessing a shift in public sector values away from efficiency and effectiveness and towards a paradigm that highlights equity. Further, new windows in research is also opening up, or we are trying to create new vistas of research on ways of incorporating interdisciplinary perspectives and methods, And we also need to work on areas like social equity, comparative administration, artificial intelligence, and climate change. Finally, there are arguments for a more proactive approach in disseminating research to those involved in day-to-day decision-making process of public administration. The future of policy research will be on policy network theory, advocacy coalition theory, to deduce the implications for the future of public policy in democratic countries. Yes, all this issues and the efforts that we try to focus upon and try to cover up the research is going to change the lives of large number of people. And we are expecting, and it will be expected, that the expertise of researchers will continue in these lines for the next 2 decades. So the research generally should be focused to more on assertive security policies, more business-friendly economic policies, more liberal social policies, and on increased public spending. So, well, with my experience of having few research on some pertinent issues like education, health, and urban development and other important minor issues, I do realize that such conferences need to put the minds together, and as researchers, we need to really have a more collective consensus about how we are going to navigate the future of research in public administration and policy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, madam. We are very much grateful to you that within your busy schedule, you created time for us and delivered an insightful message that will be inspiring all of us and our direction towards the policy research. Thank you so much, madam.
Thank you.
With the permission of the chair, I would like to request Professor Rajbans Gill, sir, Professor and Head, Department of Public Administration, Punjab University, Patiala, Punjab, India, to deliver his keynote speech and give a direction to the conference. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Hello, hello to everybody. My best wishes for the conference. Am I audible to all of you?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Okay.
Welcome, sir.
So, the topic today we are already discussing is about public policies. So, I would be talking about the challenges in implementation in public policy. Let me start with it. Yeah. So what is that all human beings want? As per Aristotle, in view of the fact that all knowledge and every pursuit aims at some good, what is the highest of all good achievable by action? Verbally, there is a very general agreement for both the general run of men and people of superior refinement. It is happiness. They identify living well and doing well with being happy. So this is what we are going to start with Aristotle about the public policy. So if we talk about our what is the definition of public policy, a policy is defined as a course of action and policy framed by the government and impacting the people at large is called a public policy. It comprises a set of intentions or purpose, a description of the direction in which the government intends to move or introduce reforms, the actors involved, and the measures to be taken. So, as per the United Nations Declaration on the Right to Development in 1986, they have given a beautiful Article 1.1, where an inalienable human right by virtue of which every human person and all peoples are entitled to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy economic, social, cultural, and political development, in which all human rights and fundamental freedoms can be fully realized. So what it gives as per the Declaration Right to Development, it is a human right and the source of human right based approach to the development. It is both individual and collective. It is both national and international dimensions, and it entitles everyone to participate in, contribute to, and enjoy development in its economic, social, cultural, and political dimensions. So we discuss about the models of policy formulation. First of all, we talk about rational model. The rationality principle underlines that that policy formulation is a logical decision, and the objective is to choose the best from the many options available. Second is incremental model. It states that policies are gradually scaled up when the viability and workability of the policy has been determined. The third one is the system model. The process of making a policy is referred to as a black box, which transforms societal demands into policies. The inputs are processed and transformed into policies through the black box. And then the fourth one is group model. It postulates that there are various pressure groups opposing each other in order to influence public policy in their respective direction. And the last one is elite model. It is based on the idea that power is concentrated in a small group of people and benefits the elites. It assumes that in the real world, there are very few people at the top and a mass of powerless people at the bottom. So now we discuss about policy making undergoes the following stages. First is problem definition. We identify the problem or issue that is called to the attention of the policymakers. Agenda setting, prioritization and formulation of issues the policymakers have decided to address. Third is policy development. It examines and shapes the solutions to issues, consideration given to alternatives. Then policy adoption. It is the legislation of policy solution, usually in the form of executive orders, laws, rules, and court decisions. And next is policy implementation. That is formation of policies, implementation parameters, human and financial resources, administrative structures, etc. And the last is policy evaluation. Evaluation to verify whether policies, implementation, and effects are aligned with the objectives. So what are the implementation challenges? First of all, it is centralized policy process. Second, friction between central and state government relations has affected the policy implementation process adversely. In the area of environmental protection, for example, the policy process is heavily decentralized. Policy decisions taken at the central level, including goal setting and procedure, ignore the local culture. Unionization of bureaucracy. Another glaring implementation lacuna is due to the unionization of civil services at the lower levels in particular. This has destroyed not only the work culture and discipline, but it has also demoralized considerably the supervisory levels into withdrawal and prompting them to take the line of least resistance. The higher and the middle level of bureaucracy are too powerless and marginalized to give any relief to citizens in cases of corruption and unresponsiveness by lower level staff at the cutting edge of administration. So what are the obstacles for honest officers? Honest policy implementers face many problems and challenges from the vested interests. To protect their profit margins, the industrialists go to any extent. They enlist the support of the corrupt officials and put obstacles in the way of honest officials. Every effort is made to get the policies implemented in a way which meet their specific interests. Consequently, the implementation process remains weak and tardy. Financial pressure. For moving inflow, the implementation phases of the policies, implementers need financial and infrastructural resources. Of course, the policymakers do make provisions for money for carrying out the policies. However, provision of funds in the budget does not mean much when the sanctioned amount do not usually reach the implementing agency on time. Furthermore, the amount sanctioned are not generally adequate to meet the requirements. At the state level, serious financial problems exist due to deficit budgets. Part of the deficit is made up by the central subvention. Despite this, financial problems persist in health and education sectors. Pressure of time. It is observed that the pressure of time often creates the implementation gap. Normally, while fixing the time frame, the policy formulators do not take into consideration the prevailing conditions. They tend to be idealistic while setting the targets and forget the workload of the respective implementing agencies. Consequently, the head office press the agencies for speedy implementation. The implementation agencies under such conditions are unable to fulfill the targets allocated under the said policy, let alone carrying out the other works on hand. The approach towards natural drainage system, wetlands, floodplains, surface water bodies, and groundwater while planning of cities and regions play an integral role in maintaining the water balance, flood cushioning, microclimate regulation, and protection of biodiversity. Therefore, for sustainable urban development, water shall remain a key aspect. So these are the components of a good governance. If we need a good policy implementation, we need a good governance, which has to be accountable, transparent, efficient, following rule of law, inclusive, participatory, consensus oriented, responsive. So these all elements make it to be a good governance. So let me conclude that no policy formulator can assume that decisions will automatically be implemented as envisioned. Policy implementation requires a wide variety of actions, including issuing policy directives that are clear and consistent, creating organizational units, and assigning personnel with the information and authority necessary to administer the policies, coordinating personnel, resources, and expenditures to ensure benefits for target groups, and evaluating actions of the personnel regarding implementation. However, none of these steps is easy. Thus, serious efforts are required for policy implementation at the level of policy making itself, because the process of implementation starts from the policy formulation stage. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Punjabi University Patiala is our partner organization for organizing this conference. The Department of Public Administration, headed by Professor Azman Gill, sir. Sir, your presentation was wonderful. It was very insightful, and it is very inspiring for all of us. Thank you for giving a direction to the conference.
Thank you so much.
With the permission of the chair, I would like to invite Professor Prakash Chand, Professor and Chairperson, Center for the Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, New Delhi, for his keynote presentation. Sir, the floor is all yours.
Good evening, Dr. Saurabh. Thank you very much. First of all, I congratulate to the IPAN Foundation and its esteemed members, Professor Deshit sir, Professor Inderjit ji, Professor Prabhat Datta ji, for organizing such a beautiful international conference on the very relevant theme, current policy and administrative research trends. As we all know, that public administration is an evolutionary discipline, and it has evolved in order to respond to the societal needs. As we know, Woodrow Wilson, the father of the discipline, who wrote his seminal article in 1887, it was a response to the prevalent circumstances in the US. US was facing the acute problem of corruption. There was spoil system. So he responded to those circumstances, and he recommended for a divorce between public administration and politics. Then after that, we know that Woodrow Wilson was there was Frederick Taylor, who propounded his scientific management approach. Then Max Weber propounded his ideal theory of bureaucracy. Then Herbert Simon propounded his decision-making theory. And Elton Mayo, in the late 1930s, propounded human relations approach in order to see administration organization from a humanistic perspective. And in the post-Second World War period, as we all know, that it was a period of independence and decolonization of the third world nations. And it led to the origin and evolution of two new sub-disciplines within public administration. One was development administration and another was comparative public administration. And in this context, and particularly the circumstances in US, there was a turmoil in US society, particularly with the urban riots, racial discrimination, which led the seminal conference in 1968, which is known as the first Munich Group Conference, which resulted and originated four major principles known as values, equity, relevance, and change. It had a lot of significance, and it radically changed the perspective of public administration. Now, it was said that the main purpose of public administration is to see the welfare of the weaker sections of society, and to take up it should be responsive and relevant to the societal needs. And it led a new dimension, new direction, which is called as the state-led model of bureaucracy. And bureaucracy got the prime lead role as a result of the first Munich Group Conference. But as by the 1970s, late 1970s, it was seen that the state had failed, the bureaucracy failed to address the public issues, and it led another major seminal conference, which was held in 1982 at the Munich Group Conference, which is called as Second Munich Group Conference. And it led to a new theme and new approach to address public issues and problems, which is known as new public management. And thereafter, we all know that it led to a kind of decentralized administration, privatization and globalization. And in 1992, this Osborne and Gabler wrote a seminal book, Reinventing Government, which talked about how to reinvent government in order to address the new challenges in the era of globalization. And the latest conference, which was held in 2008, the Munich Group Conference Third, is very, very relevant, and it has a different context. And now, as a result of this Munich Group Third, we all there is a more importance on network governance and collaborative governance, which is saying that we need to address the public issues with a collaboration of all, either it is government sector, either it is private or the civil society actors. And in the 1990s, we have seen the digital era governance. That means utilizing the benefit of IT and digital facilities. And in the late 1990s, Janet and Robert Denhart proposed a new public service model in response to the dominant model of new public management. As far as the current trends in public administration are concerned, we can definitely admit that there is a shift from top-down and elitist approach to a more bottom-up, flexible, democratic, accountable, and transparent administrative setup. For example, this new public service model assumes that public officials will be motivated to serve by virtue of a commitment to the public interest and will respond to citizens' expectations and a healthy and responsive public services. So there is a shift from the top down and elitist approach to the bottom up, flexible and democratic, accountable administrative setup. Next, current trend which I can see is the notion of public. The notion of public in public administration has acquired a new dimension. Public-private distinction is more analytical than real. There is a growing support for both cooperation and healthy competition between public and private sector in the larger interest of societal development. The main motive of this kind of adventure is how to serve the public in a better way. Another impact or the current trend in public administration is there is a greater influence of globalization, or what we can say, the impact of globalization on public administration. Public administration has become, as a result of the globalization, it has become an enabler and a facilitator by privatization of welfare functions, privatization of welfare services, and there is more focus on contracting out of services and privatization of services. So as a result of globalization, we all can see there is a trend of liberalization, privatization, globalization. Another trend or current trend in public administration is there is more focus on digitalization, which is called as digital governance. The digital governance has radically changed the nature and character of public administration. The information technology revolution has changed the ways of interactions between citizens, states, and also transformed the public management system. Now, there is, it has made the things more flexible, and now there is more demand and significance of online acceptance of online mode of working. Right now, this online video conference is also a good example of the increasing role of digital media, and it has facilitated more and more interaction between public and the community. The world has now become more interconnected than ever. Digital governance can provide a more open, transparent, and connected forum for the public service delivery or the public policy analysis. During the COVID-19, we have seen that the COVID-19 pandemic made it compulsory for the government or the state to use digital tools to serve the public. Either it was the health, education, sanitation, security, and this COVID pandemic has made it compulsory that more and more technology, e-governance should be used to serve the public. And another trend which I can anticipate or which I do see is a kind of anticipatory governance. Anticipatory governance as well as anticipatory public services. It is the ability of the public administration to employ foresight to create future plans and execute relevant actions. So this kind of anticipatory governance is a new trend in public administration. And another current trend in public administration is there is more focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion. There is more and more focus on tribal welfare. We also know about gender budgeting. In third world nations, we give reservations to the weaker sections of society. There is more and more involvement of weaker section in the policy making process, and there is more and more citizen engagement. And this is the new trend in public administration, which is known as diversity, equity, and inclusion. As far as the new areas of research are concerned, we can see that as a result of the current trends and issues, new research areas have emerged. Particularly, there is more and more focus on climate change research. There is more and more focus on disaster management. There is more and more policy and research on urbanization, then public health, education, environmental governance. More and more importance is being given to the tribal studies. Even in India, the national research institutions, funding institutions like the Indian Council for Social Science Research recently advertised fellowship projects on tribal studies. So this shows that this tribal area is a new emerging research domain in the field of public administration. There is a new domain and significance of energy studies. And gender study has become more and more important in the field of public administration. So as far as research is concerned, new areas like disaster management, climate change, urbanization, public health, particularly in the post-COVID period, public health has got a significant importance. Even the Indian Council for Social Science Research also advertised projects on COVID pandemic, particularly its implications on migration and reverse migration. So education, environmental governance, tribal studies, energy, gender studies are the new domain, research domain in the field of public administration. To conclude, we can say that public administration has gone through various stages in its evolution and growth as an independent academic discipline. The evolutionary process shows the shifting boundaries of the discipline in response to constantly emerging social needs. This evolutionary process is the beauty of public administration, which helps the discipline to remain significant and relevant to serve the public interest. I think this is the beauty and the significance of public administration, that it keeps on changing. It keeps on changing in order to respond to the emergent social, economic climate. It also tries to respond to the emerging social, economic issues. And one recent trend, which I can say, that in the post-COVID pandemic, more and more importance is being given to the state. And if we are giving importance to the state, that means the role of bureaucracy is also being given more importance. So we cannot, in the post liberalization period, in the post globalization period, it was being said that now we need de-bureaucratization, and we can do away without the government and without the administration. But this COVID pandemic has justified the relevance of public administration. I can confidently admit this, that public administration will always remain relevant because it is an evolutionary discipline and it keeps on changing with the circumstances in order to respond to the emerging needs. And particularly, we also need to explore, we also need to give more importance to the public aspect in public administration. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for the wonderful and insightful message and giving direction to the conference. I believe that all the keynote speakers, they would be, we will be inspired by your speech and the insightfulness. Thank you so much, sir. Here, I would like to address that, mention that the Center for the Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal Nehru University, is one of the partner institutions. Thank you so much for accepting our request for collaboration for organizing this conference. Thank you, sir. Now, I would like to invite Professor Sabu Thomas, Professor in Political Science, University of Calicut, Kerala, India, to deliver his keynote address. Sir, the floor is all yours. Please unmute your mic, sir.
Okay, am I audible, sir?
Yes, your address, sir. Please.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Saurabh. And I'm greatly privileged to join this forum. Well, okay, I'll be presenting a topic titled The End of Administration in Public Administration, New Concerns in the Era of Artificial Intelligence. Well, I think that Professor Ganapathy has already made a presentation on the topic, and I make an advance apology if I may be excused for any duplication. Well, as we know, public administration is generally defined as a science of serving people and maybe managing public affairs. And as such, it also deals with the vast data in public domain and handles n number of functions related to data collecting, processing, and distributing. And as the subject moves to the management part of public affairs, it also has to deal with the technical component of administration of persons, organizations, and policies. And another attribute of the discipline is that it is the largest organizational mechanism of the state, which has to deal with the policies and the politics of the day. Well, the front desk functionalities of public administration is much known to the public, and they judge the service at this endpoint. The backend or server functions of administration is also significant as it serves the engine of the machine. As discussed already, the nature of modern society is changing in an unprecedented speed and passion. The demands and aspirations of stakeholders in public administration is also undergoing change in nature and quantum. The introduction of digital technologies has altered the way in which the response to changes are traditionally met. Here I would like to mention the evolution of Fourth Industrial Revolution, which compels the administration to shift away from routinized governance responsibilities and to adopt innovative, disruptive, and dynamic governance. It is also to be understood that the digital transformation in administration, it has brought new directions in governance that was better tuned with the public management and public service paradigms. Well, here I personally feel that the shift was too slow, and the innovations, particularly in developing areas, this shift was too slow, and the innovations were cosmetic in many sectors and also in many parts of the world. Too many operators, digitalization means computerization and automation of functions. I remember one of my experience during my doctoral research with a digitalized government office, which actually claimed to be the first paperless office in the state. And one of my queries, interestingly, one of my queries was in mail, and it was responded by the officer in charge. And his response was that I have to submit a written signed letter to get the data that I wanted. The story repeats elsewhere and at all times. It is not the problem of administration or administrators, but rather it's about how we are equipped and responsive to the challenges opened by the new age. The new age in quotes. In this context, I would like to rewind the major push factors that generally necessitates changes in the mode of public administration. One is about the privatization and contracting out. Then implementation of customer-driven, citizen-centered government. Then the implementation of open government. Along with that, we have implementation of public performance management, fiscal reforms for implementation. Then the need for professionalism, And finally, the implementation of networked governance. Kettle has argued that these forces has given a new direction to the discipline in times of globalization. We are witnessing profound shifts across all industries, marked by the emergence of new business models, the disruption of incumbents, and the reshaping of production, consumption, transportation, and delivery systems. On the societal front, a paradigm shift is underway in how we work and communicate, as well as how we express, inform, and entertain ourselves. Equally, governments and institutions are being reshaped, as are systems of education, healthcare, and transportation, among the many. New ways of using technology to change behavior and our system of production and consumption also offer the potential for supporting the regeneration and preservation of natural environments rather than creating hidden costs in the form of externalities. The change is historic in terms of their size, speed, and scope. Well, in the 21st century, the century has seen an exponential growth in the sophistication of artificial intelligence, especially since the rise of big data in the 2010s. Well, as you know, big data generally refers to the extremely large data sets containing different types of data, which can be analyzed computationally to reveal correlations, patterns, and trends within a particular population. Well, major tech companies such as Amazon, Apple, Google, they all collect data through their platforms. And they have created a massive data sets. And that has become an unprecedented resource pool for them, for their maybe marketing. Well, I know that in this college we have already moved to this direction. And we have used this, we are using the big data in traffic control, crime investigation, and the like. But the potentials are yet to be explored. It is in this point that we were forced to move to the deep learning, where the change is very swift and revolutionary. But here the discussion is not about data mining. It's about the customer resource versus agent resources. Well, again, the story of technologies does not end here. New technologies such as artificial intelligence, they play a significant role in modernization and overall improvement of the functioning of public administration. Well, there's an argument that a guarantee of transparency, correctness, security is a serious issue. So many people, including the European Union, argues that the possibility of implementing AI in the operation of public administration, it is limited by the principle of legality and the need to ensure a high degree of reliability of technologies used there, as well as the need to ensure respect to citizen rights. Well, here my point is that mud walls are not the options for the sea waves. There are three major issues raised against the use of these technologies in administration. They are legality, reliability, and dignity. Actually, legality is a mark of definition that comes out of state and constitutional interpretations. Whenever we use the term legal, we should remember that say slavery was legal for a long century, and that among a set of civilized people. Take another case. Burning a widowed woman, namely Sati, was legal for many years in some parts of India. Well, here, that's why I argue if we need to survey, we have to redefine legality. Secondly, it's about ensuring reliability. That's the task of administration. We have to take responsibility of ensuring reliability of technologies. You have to ensure pull technologies. Well, interestingly, the days when inscriptions on stone was more reliable than writing in paper is gone forever. Lastly, the dignity of citizens can also be guaranteed with proper data protection regulations and through committed intervention of operators and administration. I feel that public administration is confronted with an immediate and specific challenge in the deployment of AI and more generally algorithmic decision-making systems, even if they do not use specific AI technologies, such as machine learning. Well, I just had gone through a paper, the Council of European Union, last April, they brought a paper titled ChatGPT in Public Sector, Overhyped or Overlooked. The paper, interestingly, the paper argues that at the current rate of expansion, it's only a matter of time before such models are integrated into the public sector with wide practical applications, advantages and possible efficiency gains from 24/7 availability to managing large volumes of inquiries. Well, ChatGPT, it's a form of artificial intelligence which can process and produce natural language and is capable of a large range of text-based tasks. So how we can use, or how it is going to be threatened, the administrative part in public administration. So if ChatGPT and similar tools become part of daily workforce, it has become. This trend will also affect public institutions. By providing services which are instrumental to the functioning of the state and affecting the rights of public citizens, the public sector is particularly sensitive to the introduction of these technologies. So one potential application of LLMs in the public sector concerns chatbots and virtual assistants. The Indian Railway and many airline companies, they already shifted to these chatbots and virtual assistants. These models can be used to provide a fast and efficient customer service, answer questions and address basic issues without the need for human intervention. And this can also free up civil servants' time. They can focus on more complex and high priority tasks. Another area may be document or text analysis. The AI may be trained to identify key information in complex documents such as legal contracts. And that may be reducing a lot of time and a lot of energy. And again, the large language models, maybe the advanced models can be used during this decision-making process, such as maybe evaluating a visa process or a grant application. And again, it will be a potential tool to support fair and quicker decisions. So, well, they can also be trained in financial accounting data, maybe including providing insights, answer questions, generating reports, and maybe even providing financial advice based on market trends and data analysis. This is very effectively used in stock market nowadays. So, well, the thing is that as of now, the speed of LLM's development is amazing, but we have to catch up with that speed. The race of Wilsonian administration has met its expiry date, and new paradigms are to be created. This involves speed and technology. Fighting rockets with Volkswagen is a bit outdated. The issue here is we have to be equipped with the tools to meet the 4.0 revolution. And the public administration has a larger responsibility and liability to take the challenge. I am of the hope that the deliberations in this prestigious conference will chalk out a future plan to keep the discipline in times of ChatGPT revolution. So the best wishes for the conferences, and hope that valuable outcomes that will advance the disciplines and may equip us with the challenging days. Thank you. Thank you, sir. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Professor Sabu Thomas, for the insightful message and the presentation. We have in between us our special invitee, Professor B.S. Guman, sir, the former Vice Chancellor of the Patiala University, Punjab. We are very much grateful to you, sir, for taking part in the conference. Okay, with the permission of the chair, I would like to invite Professor Indrajit Singh Sodhi, sir, to deliver the vote of thanks and remarks as a chairperson of the conference. Professor Sodhi, sir, the floor is all yours.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Saurabh, thank you. So now we are concluding today's first day conference, inaugural as well as the keynote speaker. First day went on very well. I'm happy. All the keynote speaker, they have enlightened us with their views, remarks, and insights. So when we talk about this 5 days international conference on the current policy and administrative research trends, so almost all the experts, they have focused their attention on the respective areas where they have worked. If we talk about first, Professor Sukumar Ganpati, who has focused mainly on digital era, digitalization, digital government, and through many examples as well as policy, he has touched upon that how digital government could play an important role. And when we talk about digital government, India is also doing very good in this era. And both Professor Crystal S. Brown, who is working in Department Worcester Polytechnic Institute, Manchester, as well as Dr. Stephen Macaulay, who is there in Polytechnic Institute Worcester, both have focused on, we could say, disability. Particularly the Professor Brown, he has looked into how policy for the disability was not looked into when there was, he has worked on MBBS project that is needed by the American government to look into. Similarly, Professor Macaulay has also looked into disability. Particularly, he has very, we could say, pertinently look into disability inclusive climate planning. That was very first time I have listened into that. He has looked into climate planning, how disability inclusive could work into. So thanks to both Professor Brown and Professor Macaulay, who was from Massachusetts, America. And after that, my colleague, Professor Uma Maheshwari, she has looked into a number of areas she has touched upon, from the public administration to design and evolution of research, interdisciplinary, urban, rigorous analysis, training and professionalism, as well as she has emphasized that there is need of liberal policy. Professor Uma Maheshwari is head and professor, Department of Politics and Public Administration, University of Madras, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, India. My brother, Professor Rajman Singh Gill, professor and head Department of Public Administration, Punjab University, Patiala, as well as director of Center for Policy and Governance. He has very eloquently talked about the models of public policy, how policy is formulated. Particularly, he has given very good example of environmental policy, how we can frame the policy. He has also looked into some issues and challenges. Thanks, Professor Gill. And Professor Prakash Chand, my younger brother, who is professor and chairperson, Center for Law Study of Law and Governance, Jawaharlal University, Central University, Delhi, India. Professor Prakash has worked on a number of issues and area, particularly on public administration and environmental governance. Today he has talked about digital media, digital government, and also the development of public administration from the Woodrow Wilson 1887 onwards. Thanks, Professor Prakashji. And the last keynote speaker, Professor Sabu Thomas, professor in the Political Science, University of Calicut, Kerala. He has also looked into many areas, particularly on transparency and the allied area on good governance. Thanks, Professor Sabu Thomas. So all the 8, I am happy today all the 8 keynote speakers were present. So that is a very good encouragement and motivator to the organizer, particular to Professor S. Chandra, Saurabh Chandra, because since more than 15 days, he is continuously paying attention on these aspects. First day should go very well. So if first day become good or starting all the participant, all the keynote speaker, all the experts are there. So definitely it boosts up. So I believe ki tomorrow onwards also continuously next 4 days, all the keynote speaker, experts, chair and co-chair will be there, and they will enlighten us. And I believe ki through interaction and this type of imbibing with all the experts and those who have worked in their respective areas, we will move further. I am also happy that today number of experts are there. Professor B.S. Gumman, former Vice Chancellor Punjab University Patiala and former Head and Dean Department of Public Administration, and who has worked in Dean Merit capacity in Punjab University Chandigarh, is also present here, as well as Professor Juan from Peru is also there. So last time, 1.5 years before, since then, we are attached with Professor Juan Gary. He is very dynamic, very active. Whenever he talk, always he talk with full energy. So I believe he will move further and work together. In the future, we can do some research project together as well as organize conferences in collaboration. Thank you all that. And I'm also thankful to our chair, Professor Manoj Dixit, former Vice Chancellor of Awadh University, Ayodhya, and presently the Head Department of Public Administration, Lucknow University. So he has very good chair and he has given his blessings for this conferences. Thanks to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. With this, if anyone would like to share any message or would like to share any experience, they are welcome to share. Okay, so with the permission of the chair and the co-chair, I hereby conclude the session. Thank you everyone for joining. Guman sir, we'd like to speak something. We would be.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah. Good morning and good evening, dear participants. Because of time differences, I joined late and missed most of the proceedings. But I have to make a single observation that the theme of the international conference, namely current policy and administrative research, is contemporary, is relevant, and it gives us a challenge to live up to the expectations that we have to undertake quality research, which is compatible with advances, particularly in smart technologies, which were referred by the last speaker. And we have two responsibilities at this juncture. One, we have to improve the quality of research in public administration. And second, we have to help the government to develop regulatory mechanisms to control these advances in smart technology and their utilization for the betterment of humanity. This system is looking towards us. When I was listening to Professor Indrajit Singh Sodhi proposing vote of thanks, and he has beautifully summed up the distance you have covered, I'm delighted to know that our community of public administration is on toes to live up to the expectations of both the researcher within public administration and allied discipline, as well as governance. I think at this juncture, we should deliver improve quality of teaching and research program in such a manner that we emerge on the top of all discipline to help the government at this juncture and society at large. Thank you very much. I congratulate the organizers for organizing this international conference, and I wish the conference a grand success. Thank you, Dr. Saurabh Chandraji, Dr. Manoj Dixit, and other participants. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. We look forward to your participation in other sessions of the conference. The link will be shared with all of you. Have a great night. Good night. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Good night. Thank you.